Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Nile and Gerry Tea Podcast, where we talk about ethics and magic and competitive magic and all sorts of things that come up when you're playing this game. I am your host, Nile Joan Rivers. Join with me every week is my wonderful co-host, Jerry Thompson. Jerry, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. We are stacking episodes today. We just did last week's episode, wonderful episode with Lou. I'm excited to get into another one. And this just makes me think I could just be recording multiple podcasts a day. I could just do that.
Is that not a thing that you do?
No, they're staggered actually. I have like Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday.
Wow, that's crazy.
But we're doing back
This
to
would have been
back.
my first thought. We're going back to backsies. It is good. We did just record. Excited to get into this one though. This week we are talking about friends and magic, really, and more directly the social currency of having friends in the competitive space of magic, because it is a social currency and there is a lot of benefit to being well connected and having, a network of people and support, to a point where the people who have that are, I think, significantly advantaged compared to the people who do not. And there are a lot of things that come with that. There are a lot of advantages that naturally occur with this social currency. So, for one, having a wide network of friends in the competitive magic space makes it to where card acquisition becomes very trivial. And I think that is a huge one because, last week we were talking about basically playing the best deck. People who kind of delude themselves into thinking that their pet deck is actually the best choice, even when that's wrong. But honestly, sometimes you end up having to play your pet deck because you can't get the cards for the best deck. But when you have a wide network of friends, and this is something that I have the privilege of having, Jerry has the privilege of having. Partially because we're both like personalities in the space or whatever, but also because we're like well networked in the space. If I want to play a deck for an event, I can find the deck. And I probably will need to buy barely any, if any, number of cards. That is a huge advantage. That is a astronomically big advantage that I can just get these cards to play for an event without having to actually make the financial wager, more or less, of these cards are going to stay in this format. This deck is going to stay relevant. I'm going to stay playing this deck. It is so much lower stakes for people like you and me than it is for someone who does not have this network of friends.
Magic's not a cheap game, right? And it can be risky, if you look at your collection, kind of like this investment portfolio or whatever, like you can't just afford to be dropping, $1,000 on a new deck every couple weeks or whatever, right? So you have to pick and choose very carefully. And I definitely think people in our positions a lot really take that sort of privilege for granted, where someone's like, oh, well, I had to do this because I couldn't get the cards, blah, blah, blah. And we're just like, why did you not simply make a Twitter post or whatever? And
Yeah.
it's so tone deaf because we take it for granted. Absolutely.
Yeah, oh man, it makes me really mad when people in our positions will make a post that's like, right now, Breach is the undeniable best deck in Modern. And you'll see people, you know, in similar positions to you and I making public posts where they are like, if you're not playing Breach right now, you're just an idiot. If you're not playing Breach, you're just leaving money on the table. You are drowning in copium. You're just, just play the best deck, dummy. And it's like, yeah, you played the best deck because you made a tweet and 12 people offered you the cards. Like the deck is not only the best deck, it's also like the most expensive deck in the format by a large margin. And also the writing is on the wall that it's going to be banned. So how can you even be sure that this like $1,000 investment you're going to make is not just going to become effectively worthless immediately? Like that, it is. Like you said, tone deaf. It is so tone deaf. Makes me so mad when I see people making posts like this.
And people, especially in that position, a lot of times are maybe in a position where, yeah, they could acquire 4 Mox Opals through various means. And even if the price does drop significantly, should Breach get banned, that they're still fine. Like that's not a devastating loss to them for various reasons. And that's not the case with every single person. So to just be like, oh, like, why don't you just do this? It is kind of silly, but I will say that for this last RC in Charlotte, I saw people doing the opposite, where they were people who I felt were pretty well connected and could take advantage of this and were like, I'm not going to play breach. I just can't get the cards. And I was like, are you sure about that? Because, at that point, I think we were 6 weeks out probably. And so I made it a point to secure extra sets of Mox Opals just in case people needed them. And then, sure enough, by the time Charlotte rolled around, those people didn't need opals anymore. Most people had found ways to acquire them if they just decided, like, oh, I'm actually going to work at this versus just writing it off. And I do feel like there is some amount of you probably have more social currency in Magic than you believe, or more than you want to actually like try and cash in. But it's not like a fungible resource really. It is not super transactional where like you ask someone for a favor and like suddenly, yeah, you have no more currency at the Bank of Jerry or whatever.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is definitely just like I mean, it's really similar to any other like social transaction that you have with people, to put it sort of crudely. I don't know. I think a lot about this because obviously you and I are very enfranchised. We're very privileged in this sense to have such a network to lean on. But also, I know both of us have been that for a lot of these people as well. In terms of either just like literally lending out cards to people or helping people acquire cards or whatever, or even just a means of like, I'll see one of my friends post, hey, I'm looking for these cards for this event. And I'm just like immediately quote tweeting it like, hey, vouch, please help this person out if you can.
Yep.
It is not lost on me how quickly that can take their post from like one like zero comments to like three people have offered them the cards.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
like that is free to do. That is so easy. It costs me nothing to just type that out real quick. And I think that's an important aspect of it for everybody when it comes to this is like I guess the question is really if you're not Nile or Gerry, how do you go about establishing this sort of network? And I do think a big part of it is just also being that network as much as you can for whoever you can.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I was trying to ask Lou this on the last episode where it's like, you're good at making friends, but like how does anyone else do that? Because it is not the easiest thing in the world. And for some reason y'all did not watch that episode, definitely go and do it because both Lou and Nile, I think, had excellent tips. And I think that yeah, when you find yourself in the position to be able to pay back a little bit of the good standing or whatever, like certainly do that. And it is maybe the best way to go about it in general is just consistently be a person who is, reliable and trustworthy and don't give people any reason to doubt. Like I try to effectively be unimpeachable and just never give anyone a reason to potentially be like, I think that guy's kind of shady or whatever. And I just don't want anyone to ever think that about me, mostly because I care about it, but also because like there are certainly social implications as a result of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think you also, I mean, kind of to your point, just have to be a very good, steward of like the things that you are borrowing from people. Like one thing that jumps to mind for me was there was an event a couple of years ago that I had gone to out of state and I needed a Chalice of the Void, which I think was like a $50 card at the time or something. I needed a chalice. One of my friends loaned me a chalice that was, I think, technically like his brother's or something. But he gave me this chalice, and after I got out of state, someone else also just like gave me one. And so I texted him. I was like, "Hey, I don't actually need this chalice anymore." And he was like, "Oh, cool. My brother is going to be at the event, and he might need one. Could you give it to him?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." So I get to the event. I can't find his brother. No one's like telling me who or where his brother is. and like the tournament's about to start, and I don't have a second deck box, and I can't just have like an extra chalice floating in my deck box. Like that is like such, if I get deck checked, I am done behavior, you know? So I end up just like putting it, I was wearing like overalls that had like a front pocket, and I put it there, which is an insane place to put it. Insane place to put a $50 card. But, you
It's
know,
also maybe not that much better than not having it in your deck box, you know?
yeah, you're it's so true, so true. Well, it wasn't like sticking out. It wasn't like, here's my pocket chalice, you
No,
know,
I
but
know, but you're
like,
like, "Oh, come on, top deck," and just like
yeah, well, excuse me. Chalice on one. But no, I put it in there and I was just like, okay, don't forget you have a chalice of the void here. After this match, go find this dude's brother and get rid of it. And so I have ADHD. I forget immediately that I have a chalice
yeah.
of the void in my pocket. Spend the whole day, spend the whole day with this chalice here, moving around like crazy, doing all sorts of stuff. I finally remember at like the end of the day, and like, you know, I just like feel my heart sink and like pull it out. And of course it's like bent to shit, you know,
Oh, no.
it is straight up damaged. But I immediately messaged my friend and I was like, hey, this is the situation. This is what happened. I'm really sorry. I have already purchased a Chalice of the Void. I'm going to bring you a new one, exact same printing, if anything, higher quality than the one that you gave me. So, so sorry. You know, like replacing this immediately. And that did a lot, I think. You know, I mean, he was really cool about it. And he was like, hey, this is actually really like my fault because I, you know, told you my brother was going to be there and you wouldn't have brought it if he was, you know, like there's that whole like miscommunication basically. And I was like, no, ultimately you left this card in my trust and I
Right.
damaged it. Like it doesn't matter what the surrounding situation is. Like there was 100 things I could have went and bought like a $10 deck box at the store I was at and just put that in my bag with just the chalice. That would have saved me $40, you know? But I don't know. That stuff to me is critical. That stuff to me is so important that you show that, like, because mistakes happen, you know, accidents happen. You know, anytime you're loaning a card out to someone, it could get damaged, even if they are like being more careful than I was, you know, like someone could walk by and spill a drink on your deck. That's not your fault.
Yep.
That's just some shit that happens. But how you respond to that, I think, is extremely important and a big part of establishing these networks and like trust in these networks.
Specifically in regards to borrowing cards too, I think that there are two very clearly distinct types of magic people that then have subcategories. And one is as soon as they are done with the cards, they actively seek you out to try and give you
Hmm.
your stuff back because they're like, this is not mine. I don't want it. I don't want to have to hold on to it. Maybe because it, you know, causes them further BS down the line or whatever. And then there are the other people who are like, come and get it. Like you have to find me. Yeah. I don't like
No,
those people much. And
no.
if given the choice of which one to loan cards to, it's certainly going to be the first one. And if someone is posting on Twitter like, "Oh, I need this stuff," who is in the latter camp, I'm just like, you know, maybe I'm good because I don't want to have to like do this person a favor and then have to chase them down for it.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to do a favor and then be given a chore. Like that's
Right.
crazy. Yeah, I had a time where I was starting to get into legacy and I needed to borrow a underground sea from somebody, and a friend of mine came up to me at this event and was like, "Here's two underground seas, take your pick." And one was in English and one was in like German. And I was like, "I'm going to take the German one because I imagine even if marginally it is cheaper than the English one, and like if I damage this, I want, you know, like I want to take your least valuable underground sea."
Mhm.
And the whole time I had it, I felt like stress, you know what I mean? Like the whole time I was just like, I want to be done. I want to get this back to this person. And then it ended up being a thing where like they left the event early and I could not coordinate getting it to somebody. So then I had to keep it like from that event to the next Magic Con, which was like 4 or 5 months. And that was a stressful, even though it was just like in a box on a shelf, untouched to the world. The whole time I was just like, I have someone's underground sea. I have someone's underground sea. You know, like felt like I wanted to like handcuff it to like a briefcase or I don't know. Like it matters so much to me. It matters so much, and like I never want to be like a bad shepherd of somebody else's cardboard.
Yeah, I definitely treat other people's things better than my own.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that is definitely like another class of people. And again, I'm super happy to loan those people things because I know that they're going to actively try to take good care of them. And that's not to say like I expect them to return it in like pristine condition or anything. It's just like stuff does happen, but I
Hmm.
know that they care way more about it than I do. So like, yeah, why the hell wouldn't I help you out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's not just about card acquisition, although that is a huge part of having these social connections in Magic. But there is a lot more that goes on there, like preparing for events is a big one. And I know one that you and I have talked a good deal about. And it really it is such a boon to be able to prepare with a bunch of like highly skilled Magic players and share knowledge and resources and all of this stuff, and even just like practice matches together, practice specific things together. Especially if you can do it like in paper, it's so invaluable because then you can like set up whatever you want. You can be
Mhm.
like, let's play this matchup, but where you start with like the nuts. So just like go find like the ideal seven, and I just gonna like draw normal hands and see if I can like play around. Like you can do all this stuff that you don't have access to if you're just not connected like that.
Yeah, and I mean, especially for Pro Tour specifically, being able to draft with other people is
Mm.
huge. Talk about the draft after the fact, like how the game's played out. You're passing to a person and it's like, oh, this is what I thought you were drafting based on what I passed and stuff, but clearly that was wrong. So, like, what the hell happened? What am I missing? All that is super valuable compared to just drafting against 7 random people online. And you think about again, the Pro Tour example, you have maybe 2 weeks to prep for this event. Say you're
Mhm.
working on a team with 10 people. Well, now you have the time of 10 different people. And maybe
Yeah.
not all of those people are spending the time the exact way that you would or whatever, but like you've now massively increased the amount of time you have to work with and to learn information that way. And it's massively valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the Pro Tour specifically because I wanted to ask, as someone who has played a lot of high level Magic, what has your sort of experience been at these events? Have you historically mostly been on big testing teams? Have you mostly flown more solo? Have you done smaller groups? What has that been like for you, and what did you feel like the differences were?
I don't think that there's any way one can dispute that having a big group of people to work with is valuable, assuming that it is done thoughtfully and the right way. That said, I have, especially the later parts of my career, I've mostly worked in like small groups or solo, and it's a lot of it is like I am comfortable working solo, but there would, almost certainly be some people who are like, I don't have a group. Can we bounce ideas off each other at the very least or whatever? And I'm just like, yeah, sure. Like I'm available for that. But a big part of the reason is that despite a lot of the enfranchised pro players spending a lot of time in Magic and learning these lessons and stuff like that, like they know that if they borrow cards from someone, like the correct etiquette is to, return them, don't hack them necessarily. But in terms of like the testing team stuff, no one has really figured this out. And so I'm gonna say some stuff that is definitely not popular opinion.
Ooh, tea time.
Yeah, most Pro Tour testing teams are terrible. They are not very good at doing the thing that they set out to do. And the biggest reason for that is that they are not approaching it as a team. Like we should all succeed. I want to help you, my teammates, succeed. Everyone is like, I am using my team to further my goal, which is me doing well. That's it. Everyone is there effectively to leech off of other people. And that's not to say that they're not putting in the work or whatever, because they certainly are. They just feel like, well, maybe if Bob over there comes up with a good deck idea, I'm gonna be in the room to be able to steal it from him or whatever. And there is some camaraderie, certainly. It's like, oh, I see my teammate doing well. That's great. I'm super happy for them. I'll celebrate and be in the group photo or whatever. But at no point through the history of me working with these testing teams has it been like, oh, this person is doing pretty poorly in our house drafts. Maybe we should sit down and talk to them and try and help them figure out what's actually going on. Literally never.
That's crazy. That feels like, I don't know. I mean, like the point, like that feels like the point of a team, right? Is like to make the team do well. But I suppose if you're looking at it like strictly from like an EV perspective, maybe the thought process is like, oh, well, Jerry's doing really bad in our team drafts, but also maybe I'm going to end up in the pod with Jerry. Maybe that's
There is
fine
some
for
of
me.
that. There is some of that. I mean, there was the semi-famous notion of like Kibblering your team, which was your team all decides to play a deck. And I think Kibler's logic was not malicious at the time. It was just, well, if all these guys think it's good, presumably other people are going to think it's good. And then so that he would end up with an absurd amount of sideboard cards for his teammate's deck. And then whenever he queued into a teammate and constructed, he would beat them.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's it feels very strange to me. I mean, as someone who's never played on a pro tour, never been on a pro tour testing team, it feels very strange to me. And like as we're talking about like the social currency within Magic and competitive Magic, I feel like there are good ways to leverage that currency and there are less good ways to leverage that currency. And this to me feels like it's in the less good ways camp.
But if everyone does it, then it's okay.
I guess it's okay. It just like feels shitty. I don't know. Like I think if I qualified for the Pro Tour and I was really excited and I ended up testing with who knows what team, and I felt like that team wasn't really interested in helping me improve or level up, and they were mostly just interested in, okay, well, if you say a thing that sounds like a good idea, we'll use that, but otherwise, like, who cares? Like, that would feel really shitty. I think that would feel really. I think before this conversation right now with you, I would have felt very blindsided by that.
And I think now you understand why I was mostly working solo because it did not feel great. And
Yeah.
looking at it's funny because this was pointed out to me a long time ago that I'm actually an optimist, and I would have argued vehemently against that because I can be very caustic, very negative, but it's all coming from a place of like I see how things could be better, you know? And
Mhm.
in terms of this
Mhm.
testing team stuff, I'm just like, this is all dog shit, and I hate it so much, and I will yell at every single one of you, but it's just because I see a world in which, like, we actually do this the right way, and it's very successful, and I just did not want to be a part of it because of all that, and I don't know that that's gonna change.
Yeah, I mean, from the way you're talking, it sounds like pretty ingrained into the culture of, major testing teams. Very interested to know sort of like how people on those teams right now today feel about that. Like do they feel like, yeah, this is how it is and I'm fine with that? Or do they disagree that this is how it is, even if it is, true? Or I don't know. I'd be very curious to know how people doing it right now feel about it.
Yeah, at this point, I've been out of it for a few years. It is possible that, the culture has shifted. I doubt it, but in
Mhm.
theory, non-0% chance that it could have. But I'm guessing that most people just don't see another way, or like you only have 2 weeks to prepare for this thing. Everyone's trying to do, like spend their time to hit whatever their goals are, which is like do well at this pro tour, qualify for the next one, make top eight, whatever. And I don't think any of them really view it as realistic to take time out of that to then help someone else get up to their level. Like it just doesn't even cross many people's minds because Magic, competitive Magic specifically, it's just always about your results, right? Like who is like giving free coaching to people even, for tournaments that don't matter or whatever. Like at what point are you like, "Oh, hey, I'm going to sit down and like help my friend learn this deck." It doesn't really happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is very like we have almost like turned every aspect of this hobby into this like monetizable commodity, and it feels almost like extremely capitalist in nature, of just
Yes.
like every single aspect of it, from like the obviously like the cards themselves to the time you spend with them, feels very like it all has a price on it, and there must be at minimum an equivalent exchange for
Yeah,
everything that you're doing.
you wanna know how I sideboarded to win this tournament? $5.
Yeah, $5 on Patreon, which I don't know, like I feel really conflicted about, because on the one hand, I kind of feel like you did a ton of work, like if you spent hours and hours on this deck and you like know it in and out, and you've written this really nice guide for it, sure, why shouldn't you get paid for that? But I think also Magic players are really bad at like evaluating skill, I guess.
Mhm.
They're very good at looking at results, tying that to skill. So I think what happens a lot is someone does well at an event with a deck, publishes their sideboard guide for $5, and they didn't even really spend that much time or effort on it. It was just like, that I won this thing, top baited this thing, whatever. And that means you think I'm an expert on this deck, when really I just like played it, ran hot. Here's the sideboard decisions I made.
Yeah, and they're
And
different
that's
skills
way
too.
different to me. Yeah, totally.
Like, you could be good at playing and be pretty bad at sideboarding or, like, building a sideboard, right? Like, that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that your work is better than someone who is not playing an event, but is like an expert at those things, right? But yeah, I do think that work should be paid for, like labor should be paid for, absolutely. But this is one of those instances where you have some amount of social currency
Mhm.
in the community where, hey, I won this thing, I'm kind of knowledgeable at this. And then you are attempting to cash it in for like your quick $50 or whatever. And is that the best use of that social currency? In my mind, no, but I'm generally playing more of a longer game.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we're really like looking at the nuts and bolts of it, I think like a thing that a lot of people don't really realize about, personalities in any space, not just Magic, is followers on social media are not money. They are not transferable to cash. It doesn't really matter how many you have. Now, that gets different if you have a way to monetize your followers, which feels like a really gross sentence to say, but you know what I mean? Like, you, there are various ways that people do this. There is, I'm selling a sideboard guide. If someone with 100,000 followers posts that versus someone with 100 followers posts it, guess who's going to make more money? You know? There's also, subscribe to this thing, but then there are like less direct but still monetize things, kind of like the long game that you're talking about, where having this large base sort of grants you different opportunities. And even just like the stuff that we're talking about, opportunities within Magic itself, of I need this deck for an event, I need people to test with for this event. As we've already discussed, these are all things that are easier when you do have a larger following to lean on. And there are these ethical and unethical ways to do that. Like for me, one thing that I think is pretty shifty, bordering on unethical, that I see a lot of Magic creators do, and I don't think a lot of them are even doing it intentionally, to be honest, is they will sell cards directly on Twitter, which I think is fine, but they will sell them at like the same price as TCG Player.
Yep.
Like they will sell them at the exact same rate. They'll go on a TCG Player, say, "What is this card worth?" This is $40. They say, $40, buy this card. And people will, because to them, they're not just buying an Orcish Bowmasters or whatever, they're buying Jerry Thompson's Orcish Bowmasters. In their minds, they're like, well, it's $40 a TCG Player, it's $40 here. It's the same deal, but also I get to like support this person that I like. And that seems really innocuous, but there's so many things in there. For one, when you're buying it on TCG Player, you're buying it with like more protection than you are buying it directly from some person on Twitter, even if they are like a person you like. When you're buying it on TCG Player, you are likely getting a more accurate grading of what the card is than you are from some random person on Twitter. Like it's always weird to me when I see people who I'm like, you've never worked in a card store or anything. Like, what do you mean this is near mint? Like, how do you know? Like, what are you basing that off of? Are you just like it looks good? Like it's crazy to me. But like to me, the most amount of money you should ever be putting your cards up for sale direct on social media for is 10% less than TCG low. So, if it says $40 is like the TCG low, the most you should be asking for on social media is like 36 bucks or whatever. And it's still beneficial for both parties. The seller is getting $36 for their card, which they would never get from anywhere else. You
Nope.
cannot walk into a store and get 10% down TCG low trading in a card, selling a card. That just does not happen. The buyer gets a cheaper card than they're going to get from TCG Player, probably still in really good condition, you know, but just is kind of eating the risk of I'm not buying this from somewhere like TCG Player. That to me just seems like so obvious. That seems so this is the way that this should operate, but it doesn't. To me, it feels like a little bit of a leveraging and an abuse of like status, clout, whatever you want to call it, to get people to buy cards. I've had times where I don't really like selling cards directly online because I think it puts me in really awkward situations where like there have been times where I've sold stuff online and someone will, be like, "Hey, I'll buy this." And I'm like, "Great." And we'll move to DMs and they will like try to pay me more for it.
Yeah.
Like they'll be like, "Oh, but I'm like such a big fan, whatever. I know you asked for like 25. Let me just give you 35." And I'm like, "Please do not. This makes me so uncomfortable." Like it puts me in like this really awkward spot where like I don't want to do that. I didn't want to do that from the start. If I was like a less scrupulous person, it'd be so easy to be like, "Oh, thank you so much. That was your decision. I didn't ask for it. That's totally kosher." But I don't know, man. It feels really fucked to me.
Yeah, so the person that you're describing in DMs is effectively saying like, "Can I buy favor with you for like 10 USD or something?" And it's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to engage in this, nor should you, frankly." But yeah, a lot of these posts I see especially look kind of grimy because a lot of time it's like, I'm selling cards and it's because my cat Muffins is sick or whatever.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
just like, well, now you have people seeing this who are following you and you're making this plea for like sympathy and whatnot. And even outside of like, if someone wanted to buy an Orcish Masters from TCG because they wanted it for their deck, that's one thing. If they're gonna get value out of it and actually use it. But now they see this post and it's like, well, I wasn't gonna buy a Bowmaster, and if I did, I was gonna get it for cheaper. But I guess this person needs the money, and I feel bad, and I like them. So yeah, like I'll just buy $200 worth of cards that I'm just gonna have lying around. It's just that aspect of it for sure feels pretty grimy to me. So I agree with you. If you want to like sell stuff via Twitter and have it not be grimy, have there be like no way for it to be taken that way. It was just like, look, I'm selling it for these prices, take it or leave it. That's fine. And ideally it would be much lower than market so that you don't run into any weirdo situation where you feel like you're taking advantage of anyone.
Yeah, because it's really easy to do. It's really easy to do. It's really easy to take advantage of people, even if you're not meaning to or setting out to. I mean, like the DM situation I just described. Like, it's so easy. It's so easy to accidentally be grifting people. You kind of have to be a little vigilant about it, honestly. But yeah, I think the line between being a grifter and being, a person of pure heart and intention is razor thin. And I think it's actually very easy, even without the intention, to sort of abuse that station and become a grifter. And I think the same is true for all aspects of the social part of this game and this experience. Lending cards, testing teams, all of this, I think the lines are very thin and very blurry. And I think you have to be operating with a lot of intentionality to avoid either straight up being, a grifter or unethical or whatever, or just appearing to be a grifter or unethical or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the Spider-Man quote is very relevant, right? Like great power comes great responsibility. You end up being a prolific figure in even a niche community, but you end up having a lot of power as a result of that. And something as simple as like, hey, do you want to buy my cards? Can just lead to exploiting people, even if the outcome is like, oh, both parties seem relatively happy or whatever. That doesn't mean that you didn't just extract an extra $10 from this person in a situation where you didn't need to.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. I mean, how do you think you can navigate the social part of this game and let people help you and be there for you without inadvertently becoming, one of those people, one of those like is sort of abusing the social side of this, is maybe acting in sketchy territory, even if unintentionally.
Yeah, the biggest blocker for this is often folks getting defensive in response to what is in a lot of times just genuine feedback from people that respect them and care about them where it's like, hey, you did this thing and it looked kind of shady, and they're just like, no, that wasn't my intention. And it's like, yeah, no, I know, but like optics do matter, and regardless of whether or not you were doing it purposefully, now you have been told this is how this appears. And so how you conduct yourself going forward matters. Like if someone has brought it to your attention that it appears shady and you keep doing it, well, then at some point you border on over the line into intentional, right? And just being aware of those things where I don't think anyone is asking you to understand the ramifications of every single thing you do immediately, but certainly once it gets brought to your attention, then it's on you to rectify that behavior. So try to surround yourself with good people who will keep you in check. And certainly, if any sort of feedback does come up from your community, people who are close to you, whatever, like listen to that and respect it. Because if at the end of the day, what you are trying to do is foster a very positive space where you are not taking advantage of anyone, then that is a pretty big, important aspect of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it is very easy to get defensive about these things. I mean, there have been so many times that I have wanted to make posts talking about stuff like this, but have stopped myself because I know someone who like did exactly the thing I want to talk about like 2 days ago. And I'm like, I don't really want you to feel subtweeted, but I
Yeah.
also don't know you well enough to approach you and just be like, "Hey, I don't think this is what you meant, but this is how it came off." So I think it is delicate, but it is like a thing that I mean, if it is someone that you're even relatively close to, you should I don't even really want to say call out, just like, talk about and let them know that because I have talked to people before, and this is more common with my commander friends, because I'm kind of like a day walker between these two communities, like the commander players and the competitive players. And there's a lot of things about that I really appreciate, and I think really affords me a lot of perspectives and insight that a lot of Magic players don't get. But a lot of my commander friends, I think, are worse about the selling cards online thing because I think in competitive culture, it is just more built in that we know what we should be charging for cards. So that also means when I see my commander friends doing it, I am more likely to think like, I think you just like don't know better, truly. Like I think you had pure intentions and you just didn't realize this was like a little sketch. Whereas if I see my comp grinder friends do it, I'm like, you definitely fucking know better.
Yeah.
Like you for sure know that this is not cool. And I've talked to commander friends about it before and been like, hey, like it's actually like I know you don't feel like you're overcharging, but you kind of are overcharging. And people will pay it because they like you. Every time they've just been like, I had no idea. Like I thought like I was doing it at TCG low, which I thought was already like a nice thing to be doing. And I was like, yeah. You were close to like right, but this is actually where you should be." And they just do that, and it's easy.
And what I try and do is like, okay, yeah, you got it to a point where you're like, well, I'm offering literally the same as anyone else, and they could buy
Mm,
from them or from me. In theory, I'm simply making a post, and if they don't want to buy it, they can just choose not to, right? But I, I mean, for even the things that you pointed out, where it's like there's some amount of like buyer protection off of buying
mhm.
off of like platforms like TCG or eBay or whatever, right? And they're certainly not getting that with you. I mean, there is a social currency aspect to it where it's like this person can maybe harm your reputation as a result, but like that doesn't necessarily get them made full should the card have like disappeared in the mail or you actually just scummed them, you know? But yeah, I generally want to go above and beyond in order to, like I said, do the sort of thing where it's like you are unimpeachable. Like if I'm offering a much better deal, there is nothing people can say, really, right? And I want to make it very, very clear that I am not trying to scum people because I'm super paranoid about that shit. I don't want anyone to be making like takedown threads of me on Reddit or whatever, and I'll go far out of my way to ensure that that never happens.
Yeah, I had this weird situation come up once where these people who were starting like a card selling website approached me, and they were like, "Hey, one of the things we want to do for our site is have a section of like you can buy cards from your favorite creators. And maybe for an extra fee, they can like have you sign it or something. And like you can just sell them cards from your actual collection and they can buy cards straight from you. And it's cool for them because they get to buy cards from their, like creator that they like." And I had to be like, this is like shit I don't want to do, period. Like this is shit
Yeah.
I like actively avoid doing on my own, and also I'm never going to charge someone for a signature. That's insane. Like I, and again, this is like a culture difference thing where like magic artists charge people for signatures, and I stand by that 1,000%.
Yeah, they're professionals. And
Yes, they are
like,
professional artists and they are signing their art for you. That makes so much sense to me. I make shit posts on the internet and yap with you and like make videos about like how to fucking interpret rules or whatever. Like it's not to like downplay what I do in the space. I like the things that I do. I'm proud of the work that I've done. But when someone asks me to sign a card, they are honoring me. Like I am not honoring their card. Like it is more of like oh, this is really nice to me, then I see it as like, "Oh, I'm doing a really nice thing for you and signing your card." There's no fucking world where I'm charging someone money to do that. That's crazy. I'm damaging your property. I'm damaging your fucking card. You're
yep.
never getting any money for this. I just tanked the value of whatever card you had me sign. And people have had me sign cards that I'm like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want me to ruin this card? Because I'll ruin it if you really want me to." But I feel weird about it. I don't know. I just think it's all fucked.
The difference to me is that even as a magic personality, ultimately there are going to be these like open events where, there's like a Grand Prix or even like an RC where we are still competing with everyone else. Like there is some aspect of like us being peers with these people to where I don't feel weird having like someone come up and talk to me as if I were just like another competitor because that's effectively what I am. And in the same vein, it's like, yeah, you can ask me for a signature or whatever. Like, and I think it's well within my right to refuse too. If I'm just like, hey, sorry, not
Yeah.
right now. I have to like go play my round or whatever. Right. Artist to me is different where they're literally working at that point. Like they I mean, I could also get into like how artists get shafted on the regular
Mhm.
by companies and stuff like that. And like this is a way to like help make them a little bit more whole by paying them like 10, $20 for a signature or whatever. But like a decent amount of their income is from going to these sorts of events a lot of the time, like selling playmats, selling artist proofs and prints and stuff like that. And they are on the clock, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
even even when I have some friends who are magic artists where I'm like, hey, I would love to get a bunch of stuff signed from you, and I don't necessarily want to like overwhelm you or like skip the line when you're at a con or something. and I'll try and like catch them outside, like just when I'm at their place hanging out or whatever, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, free," and I'm just like, "Hell no, it's not free because everyone else pays you for this. There is no way that
Mhm.
I am not going to pay you."
Yeah.
Like it is part of their job literally, and to me it is a much bigger difference than like me, your peer, being like a little cooler because I have bigger number next to my name on social media or whatever. It's silly.
Yeah, it's very silly. I'm good friends with Evan Fong, who did the new Codus card, the alt art for Tomio and MH3. Extremely talented magic
Yep.
artist. One of my favorite things to do at Magic Cons is when I hit the point where I am like socially drained, overstimulated, I just go find Evan's booth and I just like work it for her. Like she will sit there and draw, sign, whatever, and I'll just sit next to her and I'll like work the cash register basically. And I'll just like get orders queued up and I'll just like basically help her with like all the grunt work of what she does. Cause it's just
Yep.
like it's so much more relaxing to me than being on the floor doing the like being on all the time thing. So I do that a lot. And what I observe when I'm doing that is she does not fucking stop working. She
No.
does not she is drawing or signing and talking to people nonstop from an hour before the con officially opens because the fucking Black Lotus people come in to you know when the con is shut down. Like she shuts it down every day, full line the whole time, does not stop drawing. It's crazy. And then at the end of the weekend, she'll go home with a binder full of like commissions that she just
Yep.
didn't have time to get to that she's going to finish within the next week. It's it's insane how hard these people work and how much they work. If Evan wanted to charge double for her signatures, I'd be like, yeah, totally. I get it. Reasonable. But I'm not going to charge a fucking quarter for mine. That's insane. I am not doing what Evan's doing.
Yeah, and I not this Chicago, but the last one I did more or less the same thing for the Danners where I
Mhm.
it's so funny to me because I don't know, they were, trying to get food and it's like how do we do this because Elena's very popular. She's very good
Yeah.
and had
Yep.
a massive line and they're just like, yeah, we just don't have like time to do this and her husband Matt needed to stay there and like run the booth cuz she can't do both
Mhm.
things.
Right, of course.
So I was just like, well, I'll just order food to the hotel and like I'll go pick it up and bring it back. Like it's not a big deal. I'm not doing anything. And they're just like, "Oh, no, like no way. Like you would do that." And it's like, "Yeah." And also like I'm willing to help behind the booth if y'all need help or whatever. Just like tell me what things are priced at so I can actually sell them, But like yeah, they are just swamped the whole time. And now they actually downloaded Uber Eats and do this now because apparently they didn't know that that was a
Mm,
thing, which I thought was pretty
that's
funny.
really
But
that's really funny.
it's like, yeah, this could help you. Normally not a good idea. Having that on your phone is dangerous. That shit is
Yeah,
it's
totally.
expensive. But yeah,
Yeah.
they do that professionally, and that is what they get paid for. And I don't get paid to like put my name on your card all pretty. And also, like all I did was play it. I did not make the art for it. And I think that there are a non-zero amount of artists out there who, you know, do not necessarily appreciate their artwork being defaced by other people. So there's that
Sure, yeah,
aspect
yeah,
to,
yeah.
of it too. So
Yeah. I don't know, I guess the long short of it is undeniable that there is a social currency exchange in competitive Magic. It is undeniable that being more networked, having literally just having more friends in the space benefits you. It is, plus EV. It is, you are more advantaged in any given event for having this than people who are not. It's not the end all be all. It's not like you can't win a tournament without it, but it's an advantage. And utilizing those advantages comes with a lot of ethical responsibilities that I don't think personally are truly that hard to navigate. They just do require you to navigate them, and they do require a little bit of vigilance and a little bit of just, I don't know, you should be thinking of these people as friends, not as game pieces. And I think if you just treat them as such, you'll be fine.
yeah, I okay, so like people who find themselves in this space didn't necessarily ask for it. I think there are a lot of
Mhm.
people who do set out to be like, I want to be a content creator and popular because good brain chemicals or whatever. But
Sure.
there are some people who find themselves here just because like they're good at magic, and it's like, well, I didn't set out to be this person that people look up to and whatnot. And it's like, okay, yeah, but like you're there now. So
Right.
how much do you care having your name attached to something? And if you do, then try and figure it out, because if you're good enough to rise to the top of a thing, you're probably good enough, smart enough to be able to figure this out if you actually care about it. And yeah, we don't always get what we want necessarily, and there are a lot of perks that come with this. So yeah, the downside is maybe you have to do a little bit of work. And I think
Mhm.
that that should be, not that hard. I was talking to a person who I would best describe as an acquaintance in like 2009, and this kind of put like everything into perspective for me, where he was asking me about something and I was like, "Oh yeah, I got to like do this one thing." And he's like, "Oh, why don't you ask so and so who is like a mutual of ours? Like he does this for a living." And I was like, "Well, right. So like why would I ask him? Because like he does this and gets paid for it. Why am I going to ask him to do this for me for free just because we know each other or whatever?" And this person, just without a hint of irony, just was just like, "What are friends for?" And I was like,
Mm.
that is exactly how I do not want to treat these situations, where it's just like collecting people for their various benefits so that I can just like cash in those chips later.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as someone who worked in IT for 13 years, trust me, I feel this. I have been a lot of people's I have a problem with my computer that's unrelated to what you do professionally at all, but I think it's related. Will you help me? And early on, I always would because I like helping people. But what I learned quickly is once you help someone with their computer issue, you are now just on call for them for the rest of your fucking life.
Yeah.
And every time something goes wrong, they're like, "Hey, this happened and this had never happened before you did whatever you did to my computer." They'll like low key blame you for it and you're just like, it's unrelated to everything I did. Like I rebooted your computer. What do you mean? Like what it's crazy. So I'm very cognizant of that stuff as well and I try to be really really careful about like this is your job. I don't ever want to do a thing that makes you do your job for me for free. That's
Yeah,
nuts. If
again,
anything, I'd like to avoid you doing your job for me at all, even for pay.
yeah, I like I said, labor should be paid for in my mind,
Mhm.
right? So why would I ask anyone to do that for free? And there is certainly some amount of like give and take. Like
Right.
that is just us as humans, right? Like I do a thing for you, you do a thing for me. Hopefully it all evens out in the end and we don't have to think about it too much. But when you are going around specifically trying to extract value and equity from people and like you said, using them as game pieces, that
Mhm.
is grimy. I don't like that.
It's gross. That's gross, gross, gross. But yeah, I think that's basically all the time we have to talk about this today. We do have a couple of questions that people have sent in. And reminder, if you would like to have your question read and answered by Jerry and I, you can do so messaging us on Twitter, Blue Sky, adding us anywhere, Discord. You can email. All this stuff is in the description below. But our first question comes from Cryptic Command on Blue Sky, and they say, how do you feel about saying good game after a game that wasn't good? Personally, I can't stand it. GGing me after a game that was a blowout feels spiteful at worst and oblivious at best.
Yeah, oblivious is maybe a way to put it. There was a lot of discourse around this maybe like a decade ago or something at this point, but I was very firmly in the camp of like, do not say good game to me, especially if it was bad. I feel much differently now. Some of that is older, a little bit more mellow, a little bit more understanding that not everyone has like the same, tournament experience as me or really takes it as seriously as me. And I think you play like any sort of little league kind of thing and it's like after the game, regardless of what happens, they
Mhm.
generally line up the people on the teams, they go through, they shake everyone's hand, say good game, right? Like that is considered to be good sportsmanship. Now that may be a thing that people who play competitive magic are unfamiliar with. I kind of get that. I was I was certainly there. But let me tell you, especially in terms of like the social currency aspect of stuff, your opponent can commit maybe something that you would view as like a social faux pas where it's like, oh, they said good games, but it was not good games. It was in fact bad games. And I want to tell them that. I want to make sure that they know that they were bad games. And it's like, well, now you're doing the faux pas, right? Like
Mhm, mhm.
you are being a jerk because you view this as a slight. And I don't think anyone's ever doing this maliciously, you know? So yeah, maybe it was bad games, but like who cares? They are simply saying like a parting goodbye phrase thing that I think is meant well. They are saying it in good faith the vast majority of the time. Now, if you're getting emoted good game preemptively online or something, yeah, maybe that's not in good faith. Okay. But
Sure, sure.
there are things that you should care about and things that you should not care about. This is not a thing that you should care about. This is not like your opponent has not aggressed you in any sort of way or whatever. It's not a big deal. Just let it go. You can go complain to your friends if you want, but it's not really your opponent's fault. They are trying to be polite and cordial. Uh I think if you are a person who goes around just saying good games all the time, maybe try saying thanks for the games.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say this is a internal problem. This is like a problem that you need to look inward to resolve. I mean, like you're saying, it's it's really just someone trying to like show good sportsmanship, trying to show etiquette. I mean, we've already talked, I know last week about how tricky it is to learn tournament etiquette. And really the only way you can do it is by playing events. So what are you expecting people to know to do if you're like, hey, this thing that people do in like every other game, we don't do it in this game. It's
Yeah.
considered rude. And it's like, no, it's not considered rude. You're just like salty that you lost and you feel like they're like, rubbing salt in the wound or whatever. But I think like 99.9% of the time, that's just not the case. And I think even this extends to like, I know a big one for when people are playing events with like the companion app is the like show you the phone, show you the 2-0 screen and be like, is this good? And that's annoying for sure. I've been on the end of that and been like, yeah, yeah, it's great. It's great that you fucking 2-0'd me. Click confirm or whatever. But it's also anytime that happens to me, I'm just immediately like, oh, you are newer to this. You are newer to this than I am, and that's fine. Like it's not I'm not gonna like shit on you and tell you that you just did something very disrespectful to me because it's just not that big a deal. Like they're just trying to be nice. They're trying to make sure they're doing everything correctly. They're probably excited that they just got this win. Like if they're at the level of experience of like flipping the phone to me, they're probably also at a level of like 2-0'd someone at this F&M is huge for me. I'm having a great night.
Yeah.
I don't want to take that moment from you. I don't it's the joy here is it's not a zero sum game, like your joy is here, mine is like here. If I tell you what you did was shitty, yours is going way down and mine's not like catching all the joy that I'm just making another person miserable because I'm
Right.
miserable. That's shitty. So,
And
I don't know. I say GG's. I say it's pretty common for me after a game, win or lose, to just say, "Hey, good games, good luck in the next."
yep. Yeah, I think back to early moments too where like people did do things that like took that joy from me, and that sucked.
Mhm. Yeah.
And granted, it's been a long time since I've felt like that or whatever, but like, why would you want someone's beginning experience to like not be as maximally fun as it just kind of like default was for them? Like, why would you want to take that away from them? Just don't do it.
Yeah, you're just decreasing the amount of joy in the world. You're not like moving it around, you're just taking it away. I don't know, like my least favorite experience in a match of Magic is cuz I'm a very like jovial, cordial, friendly player. I hate when game 1 we're both being friendly.
And
And
then you
you
win.
beat me. Yeah,
Oh,
you beat me game 1 and we're still being friendly. I
oh,
beat you game 2 and now it's the vibes are off.
yeah. Okay.
I'm still being friendly, you've stopped being friendly. And it's like, oh, I didn't stop being friendly when you beat me game 1, but you stopped being friendly the second I beat you. And that sucks. It feels like you were only friendly because you thought you were gonna, 2-0 me. And now that you know that you might just lose this whole match. We can't, I'm not even saying like don't lock in or whatever. It's just like people become like rude. And it's like the biggest bummer in the world to me. It makes me so upset.
Yep. It's like, oh, I guess if I win, it means we're not gonna be friends. So like
Yeah.
I have to tank it if I care about that at all.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
really silly.
It's very silly. Our last question for today comes from Nick at Blue Sky, who says, "What are the things Magic players need to hear to be able to level up and break through that ceiling?"
This and the last episode, I think, have a common through line, which is self-awareness. And
Mhm.
I don't know if this is a thing that you can teach necessarily, or maybe it is teachable if the person is receptive to it or something. I don't know. Like I certainly was not, and then at some point I kind of was, and then eventually got a little bit better at it over time. And I think that that is mostly the underlying thing for a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, where last week talking to Lou, okay, I'm going to tell myself that I should play this thing because it's more fun for me. And that is mostly what I want to do, is have fun. But the cool thing is to like tell people that I want to get better. I want to improve. I want to make the pro tour, because that is kind of like what everyone else is trying to do. But realistically, I just want to bonk people. I just want to hammer them occasionally.
Mhm.
And if
Mhm.
I go 3-3, good weekend for me. But the self-aware aspect of that is figuring out what are your goals actually, and being truthful to those, being okay with it in terms of telling people like, look, I do want to qualify, but not enough to the point where I'm going to make it feel like work. And so I want to qualify on my own terms if that ever happens. And maybe it never happens and I'm okay with that. What can they say to you at that point? Like, "Oh, I think what you want out of life is wrong," or whatever. Like, you can't say that. You just sound stupid. You sound
Yeah.
stupid. So, yeah, self-awareness goes a long way in terms of figuring out what your goals are, what you actually want to maximize for, and if that is succeeding, you're talking about breaking through that ceiling or whatever, what it takes to do that is actually put your head down, get to work, like figure out what the best deck is, probably play that. You can come up with a bunch of excuses as to like why you shouldn't or whatever, but realistically, there are so many scenarios where that is the correct thing to do. Learn how to play it. And for anyone who is close to getting the pro tour, has been on the pro tour, even if you have like an RCQ top 8, I think you are probably good enough to get to that point. Like, it's going to take some time, certainly, but like if you're showing even like a modicum of success and understanding of this game, all it takes is work. Like I firmly believe that. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it where it's like, do you have the bandwidth, the money, resources, etc. Like, though a lack of those things is going to make it take longer, almost certainly. But if you can top 8 in RCQ, you can qualify for the pro tour. It's just going to take time and work and self-awareness.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Lou because he said something last week that I think is very relevant to this, or at least how I feel about it, where he was talking about, his very impressive run at the RC where he ends up top eighting. And he said that every match he sat down with the mentality of, I'm round one of FNM. Didn't matter if he was 7-1 day two, didn't matter if he was in his top eight match, didn't matter where he was. He was going in with the idea of, I am 0-0 at FNM. The stakes are low. I'm just playing Magic. And that to me was a huge thing personally for breaking through one of my first barriers competitively. Was there was a long time where I really struggled to top eight RCQs. And what would happen like almost every time is I would go like 3-0 into like miss my winning in, miss my winning in, don't make top eight. And the first three matches would go so well because I wouldn't have this expectation of I'm going to top eight today. And then the second I was at winning in territory, I was like, this is going to be it. This is going to be the time when I top eight. And that would just, like, I would play worse immediately. I would play worse as soon as I got into that spot. And then the next one, it's like that anxiety is doubled because
Yep.
now it's a win and in, but it's also like if I lose, I'm out, you know? So I just played way worse. I just played way, way worse. And once I got to the point where I could like not think about it that way and just approach it more like how Lou was describing, of just every match I would go into it being like, this is just like round one. This is just like round one. It just has a different number next to it. Once I top aided my first RCQ, it was like something clicked. You know, it was like the
Yep.
monkey was off my back. It just wasn't scary anymore. You know, being 3-0, it was just like, yeah, okay, we play another round. Maybe it
Yeah.
goes well, maybe it doesn't.
I can miss, I cannot miss. I think what you were doing was kind of like preemptively celebrating. And
Mhm.
there was a kid locally who, in the olden days, it was maybe like a 7 round Swiss PTQ, where if you won, then you qualify for the Pro Tour directly. And clockwork every single time. He's 4-0, 5-0 probably gets a double draw. As soon as he wins to be 4-0, he's running around the room high fiving everyone. Lose, lose. Does not make top eight. This happened so many times in a row. A bunch of us talked to him about it. And it's like, hey, man, how about you stop high fiving people when you haven't even done shit yet? You know, how about you stop celebrating? And because it was also coupled with like him then complaining, like, oh, I got so unlucky, blah, blah, blah. And
Mhm.
we all
Mhm.
knew, you know, like that's not really what's going on here. And sure
Right.
enough, as soon as he wins, gets to 4-0, approaches the next match like, he's not entitled to anything, he's not accomplished anything, not getting his hopes up or whatever, is able to just calmly play his game. Yeah, wins. Double draws into the top 8. And then from there on out, like you said, it's so much easier. Like you never do that same stuff again. I think once you make that first top 8, making the second one is so much easier.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you just kind of feel like you don't have anything to prove anymore. Like, I think that's a big part of it is the first time you're like, I'm trying to prove to people and to myself that I can top eight on RCQ. And then once you do, you're like, yeah, I can top eight on RCQ. I've done it. You know, who
Right.
cares?
And for me personally, it was even more of a motivating factor where at first I was like, oh, I want to top 8 a PTQ. And then I did. And I thought I would be happy with that. But instead I was like, well, now I have to prove it wasn't a fluke. And like that's all pressure that
Yeah.
you put on yourself or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
but it worked. It worked
Hmm.
really well because I was just as motivated to make another top 8 as I was the first one, if not more so. And
Sure.
just yeah, gradually over time, like that fuels you to continue making better decisions and playing well and, staying locked in and all that stuff. So I think just that mindset stuff goes a long way, how you approach it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nick and Cryptic Command, for your questions. Again, if you have questions for us, send them in wherever is easiest. We would love to answer them. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you, Jerry, for joining me. This has been a pleasure as always. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Really means a lot how well this has been received initially. A lot of fun to do. A lot of fun to see people's reactions. And we'll be back next week with more. Bye. Love you.